Coalwood, West Virginia, in the late 1950s, was a place where life seemed carved in black stone, literally and figuratively. The coal mine owned everything. The houses, the store, the school, even the playground where children chased each other in clouds of dust all belonged to the company. The air carried the faint metallic tang of coal, mixing with the constant hum of machinery. Men went underground before sunrise and emerged after sunset, their faces smeared with soot, their lungs heavy with the dust they inhaled day after day. For most boys born here, there was only one path: you grew up, you went into the mine, and you spent your life digging in darkness. Homer Hickam Jr., or Sonny to those who knew him best, was expected to do exactly that. His father, Homer Sr., was the mine superintendent, a tall, stern man whose very presence carried the weight of authority. He believed in hard work, discipline, and the value of a steady job. For him, the mine wasn't just a place to earn a living, it was the heartbeat of Coalwood, the lifeline that kept the town breathing. He had no patience for fanciful dreams, and to him, the stars in the night sky were nothing more than decoration over a town that ran on coal. But Sonny had always been a little different. While other boys could name every tunnel in the mine, Sonny preferred to name the constellations. Sometimes, after dinner, he would step outside, lean against the railing of their small porch, and stare at the vast expanse above the mountains, wondering what lay beyond those tiny flickers of light. Still, in Coalwood, wondering didn't change reality, until one cold October night in 1957. That evening, his mother Elsie had been listening to the radio in the kitchen, humming quietly as she chopped vegetables for dinner, when a news bulletin broke in. The Soviet Union has successfully launched an artificial satellite into orbit. They're calling it Sputnik. The announcer's voice faded under static, but the words had already caught her attention. Elsie walked quickly to the back door, pushing it open. "Sonny, come outside, hurry." Her voice had a mix of excitement and urgency he rarely heard. He stepped out into the chilly night, pulling his worn jacket tighter around him. She pointed upward. "Somewhere up there, you'll see it, a little light moving across the stars." They both stood silently, scanning the sky until, faint but clear, a tiny silver dot appeared, drifting steadily overhead. It was no shooting star, no airplane. It was man-made, and it was in space. But Sonny had always been a little different. While other boys could name every tunnel in the mine, Sonny preferred to name the constellations. Sometimes, after dinner, he would step outside, lean against the railing of their small porch, and stare at the vast expanse above the mountains, wondering what lay beyond those tiny flickers of light. Still, in Coalwood, wondering didn't change reality, until one cold October night in 1957. Sonny felt his breath catch. "That's it. Sputnik." "That's it," Elsie said softly, eyes reflecting the faint glimmer above. "I want to build one," he murmured, almost afraid to say it too loudly, as if the dream might shatter if spoken. Elsie looked at him, a small smile forming. "Then maybe you should, Sonny." From that moment, the thought burrowed deep in his mind. The next day, he pulled together his friends, Quentin, the awkward but brilliant classmate who always carried a book under his arm, Roy Lee, the confident charmer with a mischievous grin, and Odell, quick-witted and always ready with a joke. They met in an empty field just beyond the town limits. Sonny held up a short, crude metal tube. "We're gonna build a rocket," he declared. Roy Lee laughed. "You mean that thing you're holding? That's gonna blow up before it leaves the ground." Quentin pushed his glasses up his nose. "If we can get the combustion ratio right, just light the thing." Odell interrupted. They set the tube on a makeshift wooden stand, lit the fuse, and sprinted back. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, boom! The explosion threw dirt into the air, leaving a black scorch mark on the ground and the acrid smell of burnt metal in their nostrils. They stared at the smoking wreckage in silence before Odell muttered, "Well, that went up. Sort of." At school the next day, the laughter followed them down the hallways. "Hey Rocket Boy," someone called, the nickname sticking instantly, half mocking, half amused. Sonny might have given up then if not for Miss Riley, their young science teacher with a sharp mind and a kind heart. She stopped him after class one day. "I heard about your experiment," she said, hiding a smile. "If you really want to build rockets, you're going to need more than enthusiasm. You'll need this." She handed him a worn chemistry textbook. "Learn what's in here, and maybe your next rocket won't explode on the launch pad." From that day on, the boys threw themselves into research. They built a small shack in a clearing, their lab, and filled it with scavenged tools, pipes, and chemicals borrowed sometimes without permission from the mine's supply room. Quentin calculated fuel mixtures on scraps of paper, Odell hunted for spare metal parts, Roy Lee handled transportation, and Sonny oversaw the designs. Launch after launch, they learned through failure. Too much fuel. Boom. The wrong nozzle shape. The rocket sputtered out. Poor stability. It spiraled into the woods. Each mistake left them dirty, sometimes bruised but never defeated. Slowly, their rockets began to climb higher, straighter. People who had once laughed started showing up to watch. Not everyone was pleased. One evening, Sonny's father confronted him at the kitchen table. "Sonny, these rockets, they're dangerous. You're going to hurt yourself, or worse, hurt someone else." "It's just science, Dad," Sonny argued. "It's a waste of time," Homer Sr. shot back. "You belong in the mine. That's where you'll make a living." Elsie, standing by the sink, spoke quietly but firmly. Maybe his future isn't underground. The unspoken battle lines were drawn. At school, Miss Riley encouraged them to enter the county science fair. Winning there could send them to the national competition in Indianapolis, a place that seemed impossibly far from Coalwood. The boys worked for weeks, crafting sleek black rockets with polished fins, documenting every test, every measurement. At the county fair, their display stood out not for flashy equipment, but for meticulous records and sheer ingenuity. When they were announced as winners, Sonny felt a rush of hope. But at home, trouble brewed. The mine faced strikes, accidents, and pressure from corporate bosses. Homer Sr. was under constant stress, and Sonny's rockets were the last thing he wanted to hear about. One evening, Sonny found Elsie painting a picture of a beach, sunlight glinting off the waves. "It's beautiful," he said. She smiled faintly. "I paint it so I can believe it's real." "Sonny, you have to see your own beach someday. Don't let anyone keep you in the coal dust." Then disaster struck. With the strike worsening, Sonny quit school to work in the mine, trading equations for a pickaxe. Days blurred together in the darkness. His hands blistered, his back ached, and every breath carried coal dust into his lungs. One night, emerging from the shaft long after sunset, he paused outside, looking up at the same sky he'd seen on that night in 1957. The stars stared back, indifferent. He knew then, if he didn't try again, he would spend the rest of his life underground, wondering what might have been. He returned to school, and the Rocket Boys reunited for one final push toward the national fair. Miss Riley, despite her own failing health, urged them forward. They arrived in Indianapolis to face competitors with expensive labs and gleaming displays. Their own setup looked humble in comparison, but their knowledge and passion shone through. When the judges announced Coalwood's Rocket Boys as the national winners, flashbulbs exploded, reporters crowded in, and Sonny realized this was more than just a trophy. It was proof. Proof that where you came from didn't define where you could go. Back home, they planned one last launch to celebrate. The whole town gathered in the cold morning air, miners in dusty jackets, mothers holding children, old men leaning on canes. The rocket stood ready, gleaming in the pale light. Sonny's heart pounded as he called out the countdown. 3, 2, 1, ignition. The rocket roared, flame and smoke billowing from the base, shooting upward in a perfect arc until it disappeared into the clouds. For a moment, silence hung in the air. Then the cheers began. Sonny looked toward his father. Homer Sr. didn't speak, but he stepped forward, placing a firm hand on his son's shoulder. That small gesture said more than words could. In that moment, Sonny knew he had his father's respect. Years later, Sonny would go on to work with NASA, helping design and train astronauts for missions that truly touched the sky. But he never forgot Coalwood, the dusty streets, the friends who stood beside him, and the mother who told him to see his own beach. And somewhere on clear nights in West Virginia, if you looked up, you might think you saw a faint light moving across the stars, a reminder that even the smallest town can send its children to the heavens. Because no matter where you're from, no matter how small your world may seem, if you dream with enough heart, and work with enough determination, nothing can keep you grounded. Your sky is waiting.